Good evening. This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. Time is 7:01. The date is June 11th, 2024. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. First of all, I'd like us to view a video of the rules and procedures of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
The Athens Board of Zoning Appeals operates according under the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reason why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer concluding summary or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code Section 23-07-03B, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code Section 23-07-10C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that does not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary conditions pertaining to the specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other or in a combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. Any person, resident, or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant.
All right, so the board currently consists of 5 members and 2 alternates. The alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Members present tonight are Ben Lockman, Joe Kraus, Kelly Sauber, and alternate Alicia Sweeney, So Alicia, and I'm Rob Delac, Chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So Alicia will be not just an alternate tonight, but a voting member for these hearings. Also present and representing the city are zoning administrator, Mr. David Riggs, and another individual who I think you need to introduce yourself, or maybe Mr. Riggs introduce.
Yeah, thanks. This is Leah. She's our intern for this year, and is really interested in learning how this board works. So she's here to observe.
All right, welcome. So there are two cases on tonight's agenda. The property is located at 485 Richland Avenue and 16 Columbia Avenue. The board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak tonight concerning any item on the agenda, please stand. Do you swear or affirm that you will testify that you...
I have a question. Speaking just in terms of being the appellant, or speaking in terms of any comment?
If you might speak and you think you might, then you might as well stand and swear here.
You just did, so you should definitely be standing.
So, do you swear or affirm that any testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, so our first case on the agenda tonight is case number 24-04S at 485 Richland Avenue. The appellant is requesting a substitution. I think it's the first time I've seen this come up since I've been on the board. In accordance with ACC 23.07.02B, to change a legal non-conforming mixed-use building to a legal non-conforming residential building. So Director Riggs, will you provide us with your overview of the case?
Yeah, let's actually start with substitution, since we don't see those that often. So the board has several different charges that they can administer. Variances are the most common, and that's where we use those six criteria to make a determination. Conditional uses, and it's called non-conforming uses, those substitutions. So you're substituting one non-conforming use for another. Fits in the same category as a conditional use. That's Title 2307.02 A and B. So these are a little bit different from the typical variances we see, and it's more a opinion of the board than to have to follow the facts of those six facts that Joe so eloquently provided this at the beginning here. So this is a substitution, or replacing a non-conforming use for another non-conforming use. In this case, we have a business and residential structure use, mixed use, in an R1 zone. It was, I would guess that's been there since before the zoning code was enacted by the city. So they're the classic legal non-conforming use. They would like to change the use from commercial and residential to multi-residential, which again is a non-conforming use in R1. And the idea was that is this any less or more conforming than the current use that it's in? So that's what you'll have to decide tonight.
So a question for you. It seems strange that it's an R1 zone for this location. So if the building was there first,
Yeah.
you weren't here either in the
Yes.
city at the time, but any guesses on why?
Yeah, that's a
that
really
could
good
have
point. Megan, the new city planner, and I have been talking about where we would like to see some changes in our zoning maps. And this is one of the first ones we've talked about. It really isn't a great location for an R1 zone backed up against the highway, the freeway there. So it would be better to suggest changes to that R1 zone. It was just defaulted. That's the default that you always go to, is the R1. Probably not the best original choice for that area. So that's something the city's looking into. Of course, that would have to go to City Council for review and approval, but that is a location where an R1 just doesn't seem to be as appropriate as it would be in other places.
And Director Riggs, is it Am I correct that it's a B2 farther down?
Yeah,
Richland?
the Richland corridor is typically B2. Again, we'd like to see maybe some more B3 in that area than B2, and that's something we've been discussing internally at the staff level. But yeah, Richland Avenue is typically a R3 and B2 corridor.
And so, I mean, I was confused about this also, and looking at the map, I don't see, like, all of it looks like the entire corridor is B2. Is it because it is set back off of that corridor that this is actually, like, zone B, like R1?
I can't imagine what they were thinking when they did that. I just don't understand. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I can't speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, I was mainly wondering if I was reading the zoning map correctly.
It looks like against that highway, it would be an ideal place for multifamily use, multifamily zoning in that area. So
R3 zone
Yeah.
would be a better use.
would be a better use for that. Yeah.
But it does front onto Richland, which the rest of Richland is B2.
Yeah, it looks like the parking lot
Is B2.
basically in front is B2, but
And-
then because this is further back, it's R1.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I was like.
Yeah.
Thinking, but I wasn't
Yeah.
quite clear from the map. So thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Riggs? Okay. So I'd like to ask the appellant to step forward and identify themselves and go ahead and tell us what you want to say about the case.
Thank you. I'm David Mott of Malika Gall, Sloan and Sillery. I'm counsel for the applicant, SAOP LLC. Let me sign in here real quick.
So sorry. Did you bring your dog with you? It's amazing what people get for ring calls. I'm sorry, sir, continue.
That's okay. I enjoyed your ringtone much more. To your question about how this ended up in an R1, yes, it's because it sits back. This property is 4 or 5 parcels altogether, developed altogether. It has a B2 address, but the particular parcel that the structure sits on sits far enough back it ends up in the R1 zone. I believe that was in the, I want to say the 70s, and I believe it predates the zoning code. It also predates me, actually. So all I can do is guess, but it leaves us with what we have, and this is where we are. I believe you have the proposal that was submitted through Code Enforcement Office. The idea is to take this building that has traditionally been first floor commercial, second floor residential, and convert it to all residential, even though this would be multifamily, 2-bedroom units. These would be single occupant or parent and children units, so that Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program, the parent entity for the LLC, can then house survivors who are in their program services in these. There would be 7 units. There would be a first floor on-site tenant services office thingy. Basically, it's just somewhere on-site that SAOP can have their staff there to assist the program participants, can have service providers come in and meet with people there on-site instead of requiring the program participants to travel all over the city, all over the county to obtain these services. I also wanted to note that the acquisition was funded with community development block grant funds. Those come with very specific federal restrictions. So this isn't something where, oh, we're going to get it converted and then unload it to a developer who's going to tear it down and put in a dozen units. SAOP is, as a practical matter, essentially required to hold this and use it for the purposes that allow them to obtain the grant, or hand it off to another nonprofit who's going to do the same thing with it. So they are essentially stuck with this property and this purpose. And I'm happy to field any questions you may have.
I have one. does SAOP, if it doesn't get this variance, what might happen in that scenario?
So that is actually a little murky. The residential aspect is critical to SAOP's providing services. For those of you who may not know, Survivor Advocacy Outreach Program provides services to survivors of abuse, generally adults, most frequently adult women who have been survivors of either physical or sexual abuse. They approach this from a perspective that, oh, you can't just provide housing, you can't just provide a job, you can't just help them get set up with a checking account. You really have to take these people and put them into a completely new whole life scenario where all of these things come in and are necessary to help them get turned around and get back on their feet. And so it's really critical that they be able to house basically a critical mass of people in one location, in this case, 7. Not astronomical, but important for them to be able to get these people in one place so that their staffing can handle this. As I said, they're already stuck with the property. If the substitution is not granted, I imagine the use would continue as is. They may have to find some commercial tenants to fill out the first floor. You may have noticed in the application there is one residential unit on the first floor already. That is how it came to the client, just being fully open about that. And so they have just continued the use that was handed off to them.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the appellant? Okay, so we may ask you to come back up if something else comes up here, another question or something.
I will be around.
Thank you. Okay, so is there anyone present wishing to speak in favor of this request? That's not the appellant or representative? Is there anyone wishing to speak in general comment? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this? Feel free to approach the podium. Make sure you identify yourself and at least the street you live on.
My name is Beth Ferrier. I live outside the city, but I own a building at 490 Richland, which is sort of catty corner from this. And I received notice of the application and the substitution. And I would note that this building was purchased a year ago. And I don't know what's happened in the building, whether they've continued with tenants that were already in there or whether they're currently tenants who are part of the programming that Mr. Mott spoke about. But what I found disturbing was that the description that was provided on the project description talked about how it was important to change this from commercial space to residential space, that there would be reduced traffic as compared to commercial offices. But what I then found was the proposed site plan that I believe was attached to the application. And if you look at this on the right-hand side, it has a description which is what is currently a parking lot, and that's what actually abuts and connects with Richland Avenue. And some of the descriptors on there I found interesting because it talked about a new concrete island and then an order screen, and then at the bottom of it, it says new drive-through stripping. So then when I explored some more, what I found was that SAOP is already planning to put in a commercial structure in that parking lot which adjoins the residential lot. And that commercial structure includes what appears to be a drive-through. And so I'm just very confused by what is really the planned purpose for this property, because it doesn't seem to be what was presented to the board in the appeal of the initial decision. So, and I found these on the internet, and I just am at a loss as to what the whole thing's about. But I can tell you that a drive-through on Richland Avenue, with the amount of traffic that goes through there, with people trying to turn right and left, is going to be an absolute disaster. So, just thought you would like to know that.
So just for clarification, your property is across the street. Are you the property owner or resident? in that
I'm the property owner.
That's right. You said you live outside the city, so you're just
yeah.
property owner. Okay.
I live in Stewart. Well, I live in a Stewart address, but in New England.
Okay. We want him to respond. Yeah, he
Do you
gets
want
the
me to put
opportunity.
my
Go ahead.
business address on here or my residential address?
Your business address would be fine, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So once she's through, if you'd like to respond, the appellant would like to respond to her, that'd be fine. We don't want you to interact directly with each other. So if you take a seat, you may have another opportunity if you
Okay.
need to say more. But
Thank you.
The site plan's out of date.
okay.
There's a plan for a coffee shop in the front portion. It's a separate property, it's a separate parcel. It's proceeding under a separate application. The concept site plan was proposed. Could we do a drive-through here? Looked at it, very quickly said, no, you can't. The drive-through's been dropped. It has been presented to code enforcement as a coffee shop without drive-through. It would have parking, walk-up service, no drive-through. The reduction in traffic is compared to whether we had a coffee shop in front plus commercial in the back as opposed to just residential in the back. The coffee shop is actually integral to the entire survivor services plan because it provides a location right there where transportation is not a barrier, that survivors can gain work experience, develop work skills, start earning income. It's not even intended to operate at a profit. The goal is just, if we can clear expenses and pay people, that's all we want, because it provides an avenue to create a learning experience for job skills, life skills, and so forth. But there's no drive-through. It's zone B2. A drive-through is actually prohibited.
Okay. Any other questions about this before he steps down? No. All right. So, let's see, I've finished the rounds here. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Is in attendance here today? No? Okay. So I guess actually you get another opportunity to conclude or summarize. We don't have any other questions for him at the moment. Let him do his concluding remarks. If he has anything else, any other concluding remarks you'd like to add at this point?
The only thing I would add is that this is, for my client at least, this is much less about land use or zoning, and all of those things need to be complied with. For my client, this is just about, can we create a place where we can provide the full spectrum of services needed to help people get on their feet in one place, to remove transportation barriers, and so forth. The substitution of the prior non-conforming use from the mixed commercial residential to just residential, I believe, is less obnoxious to the zoning code, and it would be in support of my client's goal to be able to create life transformation services right there on site.
Thank you. Okay. Going to close testimony from the floor. And we will now deliberate. So this is a little different since it's an opinion. We don't have to go through the 6 questions.
Yeah.
You might be sort of thinking about those questions, though. Are there exceptional circumstances, and weigh that in your mind as we're talking here, and practical difficulty, equal property rights. But those are not rules we have to follow for this, so a little more flexibility. Someone like to start off with any comments or?
Well, I guess I would just have one, and it would be for Director Riggs. In reference to the parking, if that front lot were to be utilized for an additional coffee shop, would there still be enough parking back at that building?
For the residential,
For the
yes.
residential?
Yeah. For that use. Not sure, we didn't check to see if it's currently conforming to the parking, but we did check to see that for the residential substitution, they would have all the required parking on site. They do.
Thank you.
And Director Riggs, would, as far as the coffee shop itself, can you just verify as far as the drive-through goes that would have to be a separate?
Yeah, it's actually on a separate lot, so this is a use for this particular lot that we've described in the packet. That's kind of a whole separate thing where, in a B2 zone, drive-throughs are not permitted within, I think, 200 feet of a residential, so wouldn't be able to have a drive-through there.
Yeah, I just wanted to verify. Thanks for that.
So I think a main point is also that they're totally separate pieces of property, so they really, at this stage, have no connectivity or bearing on this specific issue,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
I think a question in that regard, actually, that's a really good point, Kelly. Is there does this property require an easement through the front property? And does that, interact with
Yeah,
this?
it's currently all owned by the same person, and it goes in the back, and I don't know if there's an easement for access back there. So if you're asking if they were going to sell the front lots and retain the back ones,
Yeah.
even though there's a drive through there, is there an access easement? And I don't know the answer
I don't
to
know
that.
if that actually
Yeah.
impacts this question, to
Yeah.
be honest, as I think about it.
If it did, an easement by prescription is something that could be established if it's been used a particular way over 30 years. Or
21
something like
years.
that. 21 years.
Yeah.
So it would be able to be argued because the building has been used the exact same way.
Yeah,
So even if it-
that actually needs to go, to make it a legal access, would probably need to go through the court system.
Yeah. Yeah. But it can still be done in that even if it's separate, they can argue how it's been used historically, and it's something that I've done. So it's
Yep.
it's rare, but it's pretty easy to prove.
So I guess one comment I have, my thoughts on this, is that this is a service I think we need here. So there is a similar organization in Nelsonville that also has a coffee shop, by the way, New Leaf, I believe it's called, on the square in Nelsonville. Has a similar function where it's used as an employment source for a similar social situation, similar social corporation. This seems like a good location for it in Athens. In some ways, it's on the bus line. So if they do need to go someplace for a job, bus access is here. There's sidewalks. They could also walk. Richland is accessible. So without a vehicle, they could still get around, get groceries, do things like that potentially.
Yeah, and it has bike lanes as well for most of Richmond. Not quite to that point.
Right,
but-
not quite close though. It almost comes down the street, just around the bend.
I think my hesitancy, I think in general, is if there's an organization that we were to give this to, like SAOP would 100% be the organization, because they are providing a really critical service within the community. I think the worry that I have is whenever we as a city kind of make the choice to exchange commercial space for residential, it becomes really hard to reintroduce commercial into a corridor like Richland Avenue. This is a little bit complex because the property is sitting back off of the road, and it doesn't actually preclude the commercial use of that front property. I think that specific technicality makes it potentially quite different because of that. But I think if we're actually exchanging a commercial use for a fully residential use, I think that might be the wrong choice, even for a really awesome organization like SAOP. Those are my hesitancies around this type of case in general.
And then the unrelated case with the potential coffee shop, I think helps alleviate your concern there, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think as always, we always have to evaluate things independent of future possibilities, because maybe there's a coffee shop there in 10 years and maybe there isn't. But I think that there's space there for a coffee shop in 10 years, regardless of anything else. And so that's actually the important part in this scenario.
I think just strictly looking at this being a substitution of non-conforming uses in this area, this is more closely aligned with the existing zoning district. Whether we want to argue that zoning district should be there is another thing, but it's going from having a commercial portion to not, and the zoning is residential. So I do think that generally it just aligns more with the existing zoning district, that I would be in favor of this, just strictly based on that.
I think from a spirit of the zoning versus reality of the zoning,
Yeah.
it aligns the opposite way.
Yeah.
But
Although we did hear Mr. Riggs suggest that the city planner and his code office were discussing this, and if an R3 might have been the better choice here, which is, I think what this would be an R3 designation, would be conforming here, right?
Yep.
So that seems to make sense, that this is going in the right direction, and zoning might actually catch up with this, potentially, in the near future.
Historically, it's been a hard space to rent, I believe, as well. I mean,
Yep.
this property, before it was acquired, was for sale probably another few years ahead of that, I thought. And I looked at it once, and it was already, it seemed like it was limited as far as the commercial appeal, with it being off the beaten path, so to speak. So
Yeah, it's set back quite a ways.
I think there's a lot
And
of
so it's not real visible from the street. If
Yeah.
it were closer to the street, it would be more visible, maybe a better commercial location. So it seems like this residential use is probably
more legitimate.
more likely to work, actually.
Yeah, for the space. I from what I've seen walking through it, yeah. And I think they did have the apartment on the first floor a few years ago. And I remember thinking, is it in the back? David, sorry to ask you a question.
I think the access to all of them is right in the front, but I actually don't know.
It has been a few years since I've seen it, but I remembered when I looked at the building having a lot of concerns acquiring it the way I would have, with how far it was off of Ridgeland.
Yes, it does sit quite a ways back from Richland.
It does sit a ways back. All right, sorry. to
Mr.
keep
Delac,
bringing
you'd
you.
mentioned one thing that actually I think is important to note. You'd mentioned New Leaf in Nelsonville. That's actually run by the same parent organization.
Oh,
That's
is it?
exactly the model intended here.
Good, good.
It's a good
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I thought that was your point.
No, I didn't know it was the same organization.
Yeah.
I knew it was similar. Anyone else have any comments, thoughts?
I had sort of a question, and maybe I'm new to this, so. Why did they not just apply to change the zoning for the property to be R3 instead?
That's actually a complicated process. We're looking at doing some small changes. What happens is the request has to come from a property owner, and then it goes to planning commission and then to city council, and there's public hearings. There's a lot of room for public input when you because it makes a big difference in the whole neighborhood when you make zoning changes. So we want all kinds of public input in there. So it's a bigger process than the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm coming from Texas where they did it all the time. So
Okay, would somebody like to propose a motion?
Come on, it's your first time, yeah.
I seconded last meeting.
You gotta do the whole thing.
So do you know how this works? Do you have the
We get-
I have to,
document in
I
front
have
of
to
you?
read the whole thing.
The address, case, and then the statement
Yeah.
that they're requesting of substitution, et cetera, it would be to grant.
Do you want me to do this one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you want
you
one of
can-
us doing it, all right?
I could do the next one, I think. This one.
I'll motion that in case, let's see, what case are we here? Case 2404S, where the appellant is requesting a substitution in accordance with ACC 230702B to change the legal non-conforming mixed-use building to a legal non-conforming residential building be granted.
Second.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right, any other deliberations here, final statements? Call for a vote. Okay, so signify affirmative with your right hand. All in favor, right hand. We got a left hand, that's okay. Kelly. I understand. Any opposed? Okay, so we have the substitution granted, 5-0. Thank you for your time. All right, next case on the agenda tonight is case number 24-05B at 16 Columbia Avenue. The appellant is requesting a variance from ACC 23.10, Table B, to allow one parking space where 3 are required. Director Riggs, would you give us your overview,
Sure,
please?
thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a rental permit that has occupancy of 3. One parking space is currently off-site, and they need 3 spaces in order to meet the zoning code, and so they're asking for a variance to allow one parking space where 3 are required off-site. This is off-site, or on-site parking, thank you.
Is this property currently rented?
Yeah, there's a rental permit for it, I believe.
Or is this contingent on getting the permit because it was a previously owner-occupied?
I don't know if we had a previous rental permit on this. I don't believe we did.
So this is a new rental.
A new
permit.
rental, yes.
And in order for it to be utilized, they have to have this variance, right?
To rent it, in order to rent it to 3 people, yeah.
Previous owner came before us to do the fence.
Yeah.
Like
Correct.
years ago, AJ came in front of us.
Yes.
Okay, I know this house.
That was when you were on the board, right? But I was not yet.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was a time. We came in together.
No, that was
And
pretty.
the fence is existing now.
He's Tweedledee D, I'm the other one. He's the important one.
Yeah, so the previous owner was owner-occupied family in the property and did not have a rental permit unless there was something hanging around. that
They don't have an active rental permit at this, right?
David, am I wrong? So I know the old the individual. I thought they moved out a few years ago and it was a rental.
They don't have a current active rental permit, right? So it's possible, and I'll have to go back and check. So it's possible that they had one, was again legal non-conforming.
Right.
They lost the rental permit, and now that they're asking for a new rental permit, they don't have the required number of spaces. I would guess that's the case, but I don't know that for certain. I'd have to go
Yeah,
back.
I remember when they came before us, it was owner occupied.
It was owner occupied, yeah.
And then a few of us know them. They haven't been there for
It's been at least 4.
4 or 5 years, and I thought there was a renter in there for a little while. Okay.
they wouldn't be the first owner occupier to move out and rent it to a friend.
Whoops. Whoops.
Just saying.
Yeah.
He's not here to go on.
Yeah, never mind
Right.
about that. Never mind about that.
And he's not involved in it.
Right.
So, question about rental permits. I was told by Larry Conrath, the only Larry Conrath in real estate in Athens, or whatever his slogan is,
That's what his billboard said.
that the process to get a permit to convert from a residential, family owner-occupied residential situation to get a rental permit is extremely difficult, is what he told me.
To go from owner occupied to a non-owner occupied.
Yes, and
Yeah,
rent the,
there
rent
are
the
more-
whole
there-
structure out. And to get a permit to do that was a difficult process. And I know because we were looking at a house that was in that kind of situation. And what is the process, though, in that situation? So just assume there wasn't any interim renting going on here. We don't know for sure. But if it was owner occupied and they sold the property and the new owner wants to rent that property in this situation, what process did they have to go through to get a permit to rent?
Yeah, so the parking requirements are different for owner occupied than they are for non-owner occupied. It also has, if you wanted to do short-term rentals, there's a difference between owner occupied and non-owner occupied short-term rentals. But if we're just doing the traditional rental, it's owner occupied would be, you would require a minimum of, owner occupied with a rental would require a minimum of 3. Right, our code used to be that if you had, you'd need to have a number of parking spaces per unit, and we've changed that. So that's been reduced. So it used to be like you would require 4 or 5 parking spaces for a rental like this, and now it requires 3. It's the number of occupants.
And if it was owner occupied, it'd be just 2, is that?
If it was owner occupied with a rental, it would still require 3.
Well, if it was just owner occupied.
If it was just owner occupied with no rental, it would require 2 spaces on site.
So, new owner applies for a rental permit, then there's an inspection, review and inspection process they have to go through. Is there anything else, any reviews? Does any notification go to neighboring owners or anything like
No.
that? No one else has to vet it? It's just the code office?
Yep.
Make sure that they're in compliance with the regulations?
Yeah.
To make sure it meets the safety requirements, really?
Yeah, there is, once you get to a certain size, number of occupants, or size or height, there are some state regulations that kick in, so you'd have to go to state building plan approval. But just like we're talking here with the 3 occupants, that none of that applies for this type of rental.
So as an owner occupied with the change of ownership, there's only 1 parking space. 2 would be required. Is that grandfathered in to a person purchasing that?
So,
wishes to
yeah,
live
so,
in that area?
right, so the way the code's set up right now, if you build a new house, you have to have 2 on-site parking spaces in order to make that compliant. So because this had 1, it was probably grandfathered at one time, yeah. Legal non-conforming.
Yeah, one other detail I've noticed in every image I've looked at of this property, that the previous owner had 2 cars parked in the driveway every single time, every single photo I've seen. Aerial imagery and street view.
Yeah.
So 2 cars could fit in the driveway, but there's a limit. You're looking at whatever the specs are that are in code, right?
Yes.
So what's the length for a car have to be?
So it has to be outside of the public right-of-way, and then you have to have, I think we look at 18 feet as the minimum length for a parking space.
So
that'd be
probably
36
legally-
feet outside of the right-of-way
So
for
legally,
2
that
spaces.
probably we'd only be able to have 1 space technically in that
think so.
driveway.
Yes, technically, yes.
Even though 2 vehicles have
Could
clearly
fit there. Could fit in there.
Well,
Depends on the vehicles and such.
Yeah.
the vehicles are very, very short.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
That's one of the examples, yes.
Yeah, but I think the issue being that if you try to cram 2 maybe not so short vehicles they end up on the street, which is, like, makes it really hard for pedestrians, and particularly pedestrians with disabilities. So I think the goal is that you aren't trying to cram extra cars in and end up having them just block the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I can understand why they were trying to park both their vehicles in the driveway, because if you don't, you have to move it every day.
Yep.
So that's a 24-hour parking requirement here. So,
It's very congested.
It's a narrow road.
Yeah, it's a narrow road, it's very congested.
okay, any other questions for Mr. Riggs?
Just to verify, it is this is the current rental permit is for three
occupants. Yeah.
And that's the maximum allowed by code
Yes.
per unit, right?
Yep.
This is one unit.
Yep. Yes.
If they were to take that down to 2 occupants, would it still be 3 cars?
I'm sorry?
Would they still need 3 parking spaces if they change their request in the permit application for 2?
Yeah, they don't need 2
They
spaces.
don't need 2
yeah.
spaces at that point.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Riggs? You can always ping him again, but,
I think that's it for me.
okay. At this time, I'd like to invite the appellant or the representative to please approach the podium and provide any pertinent testimony or give reasons why the board should grant your request.
My name's Jessie Philippi. I'm the new owner of the property. I don't live here. We live up in Hilliard. But we have 6 students at OU. And so we purchased this house. They're not all eligible to live off campus yet, but over time, there'll be 2 and then 3 and then 2 that can, live in this house.
So when you say you have children, you mean? That many? Wow.
We have 6 kids, but
all
five of them are, 3 of them are currently enrolled, 2 more that, want to follow in footsteps, so to speak. So it just seemed logical for us to go ahead and purchase a house down here, knowing that we would have this kind of ongoing need for a space instead of just continuing to find rentals for our kids. Not that this is anyone's fault, I suppose, except ours. When it was sold to us, it was actually presented to us as a rental. There was a family renting there. And the house is set up as 2 units. There's a downstairs, there's a basement apartment, but we have no intention of using that way. It's a 3-bedroom upstairs with a studio apartment in the basement with a separate entrance and everything. At any given time, the most we would want to have rent in it is 3. That's the most we would have in school and eligible to live off campus at a time. Once all 5 of our kids are through, we will reassess whether we would sell it then to someone else or continue to maintain it as a rental. That's a ways away for us, so. Other than that, I know that you talked about someone coming previously for the fence. I think that initially, or I should say prior to the fence installation, you could park 2 cars on site. There's a very extended cement pad from the driveway over to the house where you could pull 2 cars, but now that there's a fence there, there's no access to that. In addition, I've spoken with the neighbor who rents her house, the renter there, and she has offered her side of the driveway to us. She said she doesn't care where she parks. She'll park on the street. If 2 of our kids want to park their cars in the driveway, she said she's very open to that. But she's a renter, so I'm not sure if that is something that has to go through her landlady, the owner of that house.
It would. It would not serve much of a purpose long-term for the tenant to give you permission. It would have to be something in writing.
Right. So that's all I have. Any questions for me?
Yeah, so sort of question for you, but Mr. Riggs might engage on this one is, since it's your family that are going to be living there, is a rental permit required? One question. Or do you think you might have a friend or two of theirs
Right.
living there and rent to them?
Yes.
That's the intent.
That's the intention. But
Right.
At some point, over the next 5 years, it would initially be 3 children, but then after that, it would be 2 and 1 and 1 and 2, or, some variation of that. So it would only be 3 family members for a year. But then after that, it would never be 3.
Okay. Anyway,
Well, I
so
think you're doing the right thing then by looking for the variance as opposed to just winging it with the family and doing that. So I think you
Right.
at least deserve kudos.
Thank you. We wanted to use this as a stepping stone for them, so we're making them sign leases and pay rent and everything. There's a lot of things that need to happen to this house that we've done a lot to it, but in order to actually make it a rental, an improved rental, like to get the actual rental permit, whether we're renting it to our kids or not, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And so that's a whole nother process to go through for us. But this was like the first roadblock that we came to, was like, doesn't matter, you only have 1 space.
David, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Were you aware of the downstairs?
No.
Okay. How much does that change things? Getting a rental permit, there's 2 units, in theory, an upstairs and downstairs. There doesn't have to be at least 1 car provided for each
Still, you need,
potential
one
rental
unit would need 1 car and the others would need 2. The other 2 occupants would need, you still need 3 spaces.
I'm saying that, does this cause anyone else concern about if we were to consider granting it to 1 parking space with the fact that there might be potentially 2 rental units on location?
2 units, yeah.
So is this an R1 zone?
Yes, it is an R1.
So the second unit wouldn't be allowed to have a rental permit because of that, right?
Correct. Well, that's what we were told.
I mean, I understand what you want, but you might sell it. And if
Right.
we allow this, then there might be a potential hiccup for the,
Variances do go along with the
Right.
sales.
Our understanding was because it was R1, that the basement unit could not be considered as a rental property,
That's
as a
correct,
rental
yeah.
unit.
that's correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you alleviated my concern. Way to go.
Thanks for the clarification. That was good.
Thanks for the clarification.
Anything else for me?
Any other questions for the appellant?
I think one other question, you've mentioned a kind of larger concrete pad behind the fence. What's the, is it like this? Would it be possible to remove the fence and just have a second parking space back, or a third one,
You could. It's, the shape of it is such that you would still have to access the driveway to get back to the street. There's, the curb for the driveway is just for the driveway.
Right.
Whereas this addition to the cement pad is up into the yard. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Kind
kind of.
And technically,
Can't do that.
I don't know if that,
you can't really park in front of the house.
Right.
it would still be beside the house. The cement pad is beside the house.
Is it beside?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it wouldn't really be feasible for them because they would constantly be moving cars.
It's sideways, right?
Correct, yeah.
I think I remember. Okay.
So it does seem like a minimum variance here is the 2 spaces that she can't really provide.
Yeah.
you might be able to get a second stack space if you remove that fence, but not more than that, or not even that.
she's referring to.
It sounds like that's
can't
not,
tell from the aerial.
sounds like that's not very feasible.
He's saying it's 18
Right.
feet per
Fence
space.
there.
I look at the picture that you had of those two cars, that's 18 feet right
Yeah,
there,
they're-
those two cars.
Yeah.
There's
I don't know
a
how anybody
VW
could have had two
Cabriolet,
cars
one of
there.
those Zions that's like that big.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
2 spaces.
Yeah, it definitely was 2 spaces for those 2 cars.
Can we require what kind of car the
Right,
document is?
right. Nothing bigger than a Volkswagen.
Or a Mini, yeah.
Right.
Not my truck.
Yeah, so I think that you can kind of vaguely see
Yeah.
the fence go across there, and there's that pad there, but
Yeah.
which would get you a second space, but not a third space. I don't think in any way.
You are limited.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're limited because it's a busy, narrow street, as Kelly said. I mean, I we've all gone up and down that road. Okay, well, my questions are appeased.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor of the request? Anyone wishing to speak in general comment? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the case? Okay. So I guess one last opportunity. Anything else you want to tell us before we close the floor?
I've had one thing I've been wondering. You said 6, and then you went down to 5 kids.
We have 6 kids, but only 5 of them are planning to go.
You are very pro Bobcats there in Hilliard. we appreciate it here.
Neither my husband or I went here, but our oldest started the trend, and
It's a great school.
So I'm now closing the testimony from the floor, and the board will now deliberate. First thing I want to say is I have 2 kids at OU right now. So one of them lives at home, one of them does not. So
Well,
Just putting it out there for you in a year. Okay.
So are there exceptional circumstances?
well, I think I have one question in general, which is, do we have any kind of concept of the parking pressure on Columbia?
I've looked at every air photo I can find, including Bing, Google, the county's data, the state's data. There's about 10 images I've seen. I've never counted more than 4 cars in front of the 3 houses there. So, and it's a little sparser when you get a little further away. So it doesn't, and the limitation with that is air photos are typically taken during the day.
Right.
But, so it's not a nighttime number. But it doesn't look like there's a problem with parking
Yeah.
on the street in this section at least. I'd say in this section of 5 or 6 houses, it doesn't look like there's any issues.
Yeah, I agree. I live in this area, and there's always cars on the street, but not to the degree that you wouldn't be able to find a spot.
And I think the recent direction of the code has been to reduce parking requirements
Sure.
in general.
It's at least 1 fewer than it would have been before code changed. The default was 2 just for the being a unit, and then every new bedroom after that was another one. It's now just 1 for the first room essentially. So it's 3, it used to be 4. So it's a little better than it was. I honestly feel like that could be reduced further
Sure.
in the code, but it was a good step in the right direction.
Director Riggs, I've never quite understood the 3 unrelated people piece of the permit. What is, if you have 2 people that are related, 2 children, and 1 person that isn't, that obviously works with the 3 unrelated, but does the inverse of that, where you have 1 child and 2 friends, is that an acceptable use without a permit or not?
So if you would have two brothers and another person, that's 2. We count that as 2
Okay.
instead of 3. So 3 unrelated.
So, right, but a single child of the owner and 2 friends are 3
Still 3.
unrelated.
Still
That's
3.
still
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
I was understanding it
Yep.
correctly.
All right, so any other comments or things before we dive into the question then?
Yeah, let's do the questions.
Okay. Are there exceptional circumstances? So there's not really room to put maybe one more space like we discussed, but that's probably not very feasible here, it seems.
Right.
So this is just a narrow lot. Probably, is this a 50-foot wide lot? I didn't look at that, but it might be 50 feet wide, which is less than the required right now by the code is 66 feet wide in the code currently. So it's an old lot. It's a small lot. You can't really do much here. Plus, there's no backyard. Essentially, it drops off.
Oh, yeah.
Down the hill. So you couldn't even really build a driveway down to the backyard to put parked cars or anything. There's just no options for that. So I think that there's exceptional circumstances here. The terrain, the width of the lot, the size of the lot, all restrict the ability to have more off-street parking.
Yes. Yeah. There's
Perhaps there is
no ways you could
a
have
property that abuts North Congress.
Or putting something in from the back,
Yeah.
from the other street.
Appears to be a possibility.
I don't know how the terrain, what the terrain is back there, but
I don't think Congress goes. I guess
it is behind it.
It's right at the bottom of the stairs there.
Yeah, it's
Go down.
right at the stairs bottom here.
Yeah.
Stairs here.
Right next to 241.
Yeah, in fact, the person that lives across the street at the bottom of the stairs was Wolfgang Sitzel, I think his name is. He's on the list of neighbors because it's an adjoining property just across the
Yeah,
right
I saw
of way.
that. I saw some north.
So it does connect to the street. This property does connect to the street, but I didn't go out there and try and look at that. I have a feeling the terrain would not really allow. And then you'd have to get from there up to the house. That might be the bigger problem.
Right. But it would eliminate potential need for 2 additional spaces and possibly just need 1 additional street space that way. It's kind of similar to what we did with, what was that house? Just up off of North Lancaster, what was it? Fort Street.
Mound Street?
Mound Street, where,
I think I remember that.
They had enough space to put one vehicle if they
Right.
modified or if they improved it.
right?
So
we gave them a
we required them
conditional-
to do that.
Right,
So they have one that they were required.
right,
to
but they had
provide.
none. So
Right.
we're just giving them 1, for sure. And this, they have 1.
So this is sort of the same situation in that case, in that they've got a space for one. We don't have to require that, they've already got it.
Right.
We're doing the same sort of exception we made there, which was for 2 spaces that they would be allowed to essentially use street parking for.
Right.
Is there practical difficulty and undue hardship? Extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. So in this case, the previous owner, occupier, or renters were parking 2 vehicles in the driveway because they had 2 vehicles apparently at least, and were forced to do that in order to try and make things work.
Yeah, I think the undue hardship in this case is the geography and geology of, it being on the side of a hill, like,
Right, the actual space.
yeah. That is a lot of properties in Athens, though, on the other hand.
Especially on, this is sort of west side, on this side of the city,
Near
really,
north side.
in particular.
Yeah.
Preservation of equal property rights. Little interpretation, these regulations deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others. Well, clearly, I haven't actually looked to see how many don't have driveways that could accommodate 2 or 3 vehicles, but there's got to be
I would think,
others
I would
here.
think many, yeah, I would think many, and I don't think
So Alicia,
anyone.
you said you live in the area there?
Yeah, a lot have a very similar situation where only 1 car can fit in the driveway.
I got 2 rentals that are within 10 houses of this on North Lancaster, and I mean, my place is one of the only ones, right, David? My one down at 187 North Lancaster probably is one of the only ones where There's four, there's 4 bedrooms in the whole place, and there's probably space to put like 5 or 6 cars, and there's not another one even close to that. So I think it is fairly universal
Yeah, I think
like that, for like what she's dealing with.
Yeah, if you look at a bunch of the different houses, a lot of them have maybe a stacked garage
Yeah.
for a second car. But very few of them, maybe only one of them that my friend lives in has a 2-car garage and a driveway that you could put 3 in.
We got no letters of dissent against.
I didn't see any, we didn't have any letters or anything come in about this, right?
Right, so,
Okay, next question, minimum variance. Variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. So we're granting essentially 2 spaces that are not being required to be off-site if we do this. I think we talked a little bit about this. The only thing, could you squeeze another space in there? I think even if we did that and the fence was taken down or something, the space you're required to have, not just the length, but the width, probably 2 spaces wouldn't fit next to each other, right?
right,
You wouldn't be able to
Right.
meet the requirement even
couldn't
then.
even do it
So I
if we
think
made
the
them.
minimum variance is 2, and that's what's being requested here. So I think this seems to me to be the minimum variance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Absence of detriment. We haven't heard any complaints from anyone here. There's no one here to testify in opposition. Or is there any way you can construe that somebody's being affected? It seems like parking is not in high demand on this street, so that's not,
Correct.
not like competition for parking is going to be a problem, I don't think.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And not of a general nature, condition or a situation of a specific piece of property or the intended use of said property is not of so general or recurrent in nature as to make reasonably practical the formulation, but general regulation. And along that line, I'd say the city's already reduced the requirement somewhat, and so helped address this issue to some extent, so I think.
I would argue this is of a very general nature, and this is one of the most common
Right.
variance requests that
Okay,
we see.
we are seeing a lot of
So
these, right?
This is the one, no, we're like,
Yeah, it's like corner lots. Yeah, this is something that should be addressed in the code and
Right.
and not on a one-off, one by one nature. Is my feeling. Mostly because while the current use seems completely reasonable, controlling for future uses may or may not may or may not be in the interest of the spirit of the code.
Okay, would someone like to propose a motion?
Everyone looks at me.
Do you have the document up in front of you?
it's right there.
Okay.
Yeah, you could just read.
Yeah, just practice.
read it.
Okay. I'm gonna basically say what Ben said. So for case number 24-05B regarding 16 Columbia Avenue, a request for a variance from ACC 23.10 Table B to allow 1 parking space where 3 are required, making a motion to approve the request.
You're gonna be doing it all the time from now on. It's so good. I would love to second that.
Okay. We have a second. Any other comments before we vote? All right.
Whatever real concerns I had you over that 1-bedroom thing, you alleviated, frankly.
So vote by sign affirmative by the sign of your right hand. All those in favor of approving this motion, variance, raise your right hand. And Kelly
Kelly
raises
left.
his left again, okay, of course. And any opposed? One opposed, okay, so 4-1, you have your variance. Thank you very much for coming to present to us. Okay, other business. So we have disposition of minutes from April 9th, which I watched the video actually from the last meeting.
I was gonna
and
ask if you did.
I saw that because I was not there, we weren't able to pass the minutes. So there were only 4 of us at that meeting. Kay is no longer on the board, so that leaves 3, which were
Us 3.
Joe, me, and Kelly, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the three of us. I'll move that we approve the minutes as written for April, was it
Ninth.
April 9th, 2024?
I second that motion.
Right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that passes. So disposition of minutes from May 14th. I was not in attendance at this meeting.
Some of us were.
So all the
Three
rest
of
of
us?
you were, right?
Were you
Kelly,
there?
were you here?
I was there.
Yeah.
So we got 4.
Okay.
Can we vote? with
Yes.
4?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you just have to have 3 to approve it, so if,
I have something to say about it.
yeah, do you have something?
This seems really silly, but my name is spelled wrong.
That's not
Is
not
that-
silly.
It's
not
in
silly at all.
2 instances. It's Alicia spelled with a C, not an SH. I don't know if that matters.
Yes, so. Looking
Did
to
you write
see
it down?
why is it not coming up? I have to.
Right.
I have to reopen the document in order for me to see. So
I did not notice that, but
someone can make a motion with those corrections included to approve with those corrections.
I will make a motion that with the names corrected, we approve the notes for, or the minutes from May 14th, 2024.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Right, minutes are approved. Thank you very much for coming. All right,
We adjourn.
Do you need to adjourn?
we don't do an official adjournment, we're done with business, so.
Yeah.